Okay, in this video we're going to learn more about functions and we're going to use the integer data type. So let me delete the previous code. We start over and we're going to make a sum. So we have int number 1 is 5, int number 2 is 10. And we want to add these two numbers, but we want to do it within a function. What we could simply do is we could simply say, if we don't want to use a function, we could make int sum, and sum equals number 1 plus number 2, and then we can do console.writeLine sum. In this case, it will display 15 in the output window. But if I have to do multiple sums, I have to copy paste this code over and over in its current state. So if I want to do 5 plus 10, and then I want to do 6 plus 15, also note that you can't define the variable two times. Either I can reassign the variable, so in this case I leave out int and I reuse the previously defined variables, so you only have to create it once here, and now I'm reassigning a value to it. Or what I could have done is used different variable names. This will create a new variable. And change the values. 15, 21 and 16. The most optimal way is to create as least variables as possible. So in this case, the second solution was the best one, where we don't redefine variables if you don't need to reuse the existing ones. But as you can see, this can quickly get messy, especially if we want to do a lot of sums. Let's say we want to do 5 sums. As you can see, this is already taking a large space in the main function. What we could have done is we could have made a function called static int calculate sum, and as input parameters we have number 1 and number 2. Then we return the sum of number 1. I will show you first. We could either put it in a value, so we could say int sum is number 1 plus number 2, and then return the sum. Then if I delete all of this, I could just say int sum is calculate sum 5 and 10. You can fill in the variables directly. This will output 15. Or I could have made it even shorter. Instead of creating a variable in calculate sum, I could return straight away number 1 plus number 2. So what it does here is it adds up the value of number 1 and the value of number 2 together, and then it returns this result. And same here. Currently I'm creating a variable called sum, and I'm assigning the output value of calculate sum to this, and then I'm doing writeLine of sum. What I could have done is I could have just taken calculate sum 5 and 10 and immediately print it to the screen. So as you can see, our code has become a lot shorter and we have the same result. We're printing 15, and in order for us to do 5 different sums. You can see that now this barely takes any space in the code, and we have the same results that we wanted. And of course, we can do more things than just calculating a sum. We can also make a multiplication, static int multiply numbers, int number 1, int number 2, and then return number 1 times number 2. Remember that we use the star symbol to do multiplication. So first we can say, to make it simple, we can do calculate sum 5 and 10. Then we can do multiply numbers 5 and 10, which will give 50. Then we can also make one called static int divide numbers, number 1, int number 2. And we can also make one called subtract numbers, int number 1 and int number 2. Return number 1 minus number 2. So in this case, I'm going to show you what happens if we divide 5 by 10. So on our first line, we are calculating the sum of 5 and 10. On the second line, we are multiplying the numbers 5 and 10. On the line below, we are dividing 5 by 10. And below that, we are doing 5 minus 10. The results are 15, 50, 0, and minus 5. Probably you wouldn't have expected 0. You would have expected 0.5, which is 5 divided by 10. But because we're using the integer data type, we only display whole numbers. So only 0, 1, 2, 3, or minus 1, minus 2, and minus 3. We cannot display numbers like 2.5, 2.75. We can't do that with the integer data type. We have to use another data type for that, which I will teach you later. Okay, this sums up the second video about functions and integer values.